Welcome to Lecture 21 in Communication 1110. This lecture is structuring your persuasive speech. It's important that you read the chapters in the book on persuasion in conjunction with this lecture, and that you also look at the PowerPoint because there are some examples on that will be helpful. Before you can start to structure your persuasive speech, which is part of Logos and extremely important as we've seen before, you have to know what kind of claim or proposition that you have. There are traditionally 4 types of claims or thesis sentences that you can have. The kind of claim you have, as well as your audience, will determine to a great extent how you structure your speech and what you include or don't include. Your survey will help you a great deal with this, because if you find out that your audience, for example, is very knowledgeable already, you don't want to spend a lot of time on giving them background information. That would be a waste of time. Or if you find out that they're very apathetic about your topic, you want to spend time on showing them how big a problem it is. So the survey is helpful, the research you're doing is helpful, and knowing what type of claim you have is helpful. As the book states, the audience is sitting there having a mental dialogue with you or debate as you speak. So we know that we don't really persuade people, that we give them the resources to persuade themselves. So I want to first talk about the 4 types of claims. The first claim is a claim of fact. This is not like President Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963. That's an established fact, but it's more like President Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald acting by himself. There are a lot of people today who don't agree with what I just said, and they have their reasons and they go back and forth. It's still a debated argument with facts on both sides, as well as heated emotions that go along with that. Now, of course, some people are more informed for their belief than others, but that's not the point here. The point is that there are people on both sides, and they disagree, and they have their reasons. There are some people who think that President Kennedy was not really assassinated, and he's still being kept on life support. He'd be 90 years old now, but the date of the assassination is pretty much an established fact, but the causes are not. Some other examples of a claim of fact would be in a law court. Did the defendant do the crime? And another example would be playing video games does not cause the player to commit violent crimes. That's a common topic in class. The second type of claim is a claim of definition. And these revolve around the meaning of words, usually philosophical or medical or legal or religious terminology. In church on Sunday, a pastor might explain what a Bible passage means, and that would be a claim of definition. It's what it means. An attorney might argue that her client, while that person was responsible for the death, did not commit first-degree murder. What he did not meet the definition. The third type of claim is one of value, and this is one where a lot of you probably will want to do your speech, although you may think about it a little bit after your survey and after this lecture. This is far more common. A claim of value argues over the rightness or wrongness, the benefit, the healthiness, the disadvantages of a topic or an idea, or a person even. The value may be related to health, to psychology, to morality, to philosophy, to politics, etc. Video games are not healthy for children under the age of 12 is a claim of value. Another one would be video game playing is beneficial for young people because it teaches cognitive and problem-solving skills. Both of those are saying something is good and the reasons for it. So you can see the distinction between those, the fact and the value. The next type of claim is the most common in the real world because people are always trying to get us to do something. It's a claim of policy. And a claim of policy almost always has the word should in it, and that kind of gives it away. And on the PowerPoint, there are some examples of propositions, and it would be a good idea if you went through those and decided which ones each was. You know, is it a claim of fact, claim of definition, etc. Because you're going to need to know that for both your speech and for the final exam. Now, since we've talked about those 4 types of claims, let's talk about how you would structure a speech. First of all, a claim of fact. Fact, as the textbook tells us, would use a topical. You would give your separate, discrete, not overlapping reasons for the proposition to be true, the proposition of fact. You want to put your strongest one last. That's called climax organization, and that's always a good idea. The next one I want to talk about is proposition of policy, and then we'll come back to value later, because most of you are doing a proposition of policy, and I want to camp on this one for a while. A proposition of policy, as I said, advocates a change either in individual behavior or in a government or some authorities' laws and policies. And what I want to use here is what's called Monroe's motivated sequence. It's a 5-step plan. It's very logical. It covers all the bases that you need for a problem solution, policy, speech. But it's not an outline. You have to understand that. It's a framework. It's an approach. So don't try to translate it into an exact outline because it won't work that way. When you do a speech of policy, there are certain logical requirements. The first one is that you, as we've mentioned before, people have to feel that there's a need for a change. Something's got to be wrong. There's got to be some sort of harm or problem or deficiency. So that's the first thing. Something's got to be wrong. Then you want to show that what exactly is going to be changed. You know, you have to be clear about the solution. And a good policy speech will advocate a very clear solution. But you can't just say that this is what you're going to do. You have to show that it works, that it can be put into place, it has workability, and that it will actually solve the problem. You know, if you go to a doctor and the doctor gives you a pill, well, sure, you can take the pill, but is the pill actually going to solve the problem? That's the point. So get at the root. So the solution needs to get at the root of the problem, the cause, not just deal with the symptoms or make you feel better for a little bit. So those are the things that a speech of policy should do logically, and that's exactly what Monroe's motivated sequence does. So let's list the 5 steps of Monroe's motivated sequence. And yes, you need to do these in your speech, and yes, you need to know these for the final exam. The 5 steps are attention, need, satisfaction, visualization, and action. Okay? Let's talk about attention first. This is, of course, the introduction. In the introduction, you're getting attention to the problem. You're getting attention that there is a solution. You're getting attention to your own credibility, that you know what you're talking about, and you have some experience or some credentials in the field in this topic. And you want to make your thesis and your preview very clear. At the end of the attention step, the audience should be sort of convinced, I need to listen to this. That's the point of the attention step. And in the persuasive speech, you might want to take a little more time with the attention step, both preparing it, make sure it's very zippy and zappy, as we've said, and also you want to take a little more time in the speech. The need step is very important. It may take up Roman numeral 1. It may also take up Roman numeral 2 of your speech. It should be very clear about the harm, how it affects people, who it affects, how much it costs, how long it's been going on, how long it might go on in the future, etc. So you want to be very clear that there's harm. Sometimes in a policy speech, it's not necessary to go into a great deal of how bad the harm is, but you may want to talk more about why the harm is. For example, we often complain about gas prices going up. When it goes up to $4 a gallon, you don't need to tell people that that's hard. Why has that happened is more the question than that it's a problem. What are the causes? So also in the need step, you may want to talk about the causes of the problem and get into the root. The third step, the satisfaction, is dealing with the solution in general. Not exactly what you want the audience to do that minute, that's the action step, but what does the solution look like? How does it work? How much is it going to cost? Who does it apply to, etc.? What does it look like? And then not just what it looks like and how it works, but does it work? You have to prove it and defend it. Sometimes we can prove and defend things by drawing an analogy, by saying it worked over here. I often use the example of, why does Tennessee have a lottery now? Well, because Georgia had one. And Georgia had one for several years and it worked for them, so Tennessee finally got one itself. They could point to Georgia. So you can say it worked in a similar situation, analogical reasoning. So that's going to be the satisfaction step. You can also think of that as the solution step if you like. The next step, visualization, doesn't have anything to do with visual aids necessarily, although you could use them, but that's not the point. Visualization is sort of a looking to the future, saying if we implement this solution, look at all the great stuff that's going to happen, the benefits, how well it will work. Or if we don't do something, it's going to get worse. Now, you can see how much advertising uses this and how much we're in a political campaign right now, and how much politicians do this. You know, if you vote for my opponent, look what's going to happen. If you vote for me, look what's going to happen. This is sort of a promising and rewards and benefits idea of visualization. If you don't have time, you can leave that out of the speech, but in some cases it is a very important part of the speech. For example, if you're trying to get people to donate blood, you'd want to talk about the benefits of donating blood, both to the community and to the individual. The last step is the action step, and this should probably be the last main point, Roman numeral point of the speech. I don't think you want to put it in the conclusion. Save the conclusion for maybe some emotional story or summary, that kind of thing. The action step, you want to get very specific about what people should do right then to get started. We do know that if you can get people to make a little step, a baby step, if you will, in the right direction, they're much more likely to keep going. There's just something about that. So small steps can lead to bigger steps. Try to get the people to do something, even if it's just go to a website, call somebody, sign a petition, etc. So we humans, though, are very inconsistent. We say that we believe a lot of things that we don't really act on. And we might do this because we see the change is too big. It's not something that we can do, which in the action step you can say, all right, let's get started. This is the first step. Do this, etc. Sometimes we don't have clear directions. We just don't know what to do. So if you wanted people to give blood, you might say, next week, the Bloodmobile is going to be on campus. Give them clear directions on what to do. Sometimes we don't follow through because we don't have a role model or a mentor, somebody that comes alongside and helps us. Sometimes we don't follow through because we think it'll never happen to us. We sort of in denial that happens. Or we just plain procrastinate. We say we'll get around to it eventually. Or some of us are risk takers, you know, and that's a personality thing. But another reason that we don't always follow through is we have competing values. We want to do it, but there's something else that's sort of tearing us away from it. So if you know this about your audience, if you know that they agree with you, but they're just not acting upon it, what should you do? Well, you first want to start with very clear directions about what they should do. And that's what the action step is for. Do this, then do this. Make it very clear how to get started. You may want to talk about how they can connect with other people who can support them, join a club, join an organization, etc. You can re-emphasize how strong the harm is so that they're less likely to procrastinate and be in denial and avoid that. You may want to use stories of successful people. See, this works. You know, that's what the visualization step is. Address the conflicts that they have directly. And sometimes it's a good idea to just use some good old emotional appeal with pictures and narratives in the end of your speech to sort of cement that action step. In class, I often give the story about my husband and I didn't have a will for our son when he was growing up, and I knew that I needed a will, but we could never decide on who would be his guardian, so we just kept putting it off and making excuses and saying, oh, you know, we'll never die together or something like that. But then when he was 16, we were going to go on a cruise together, and it occurred to me, oh, we might die on the cruise, which is kind of silly. But by then he just rolled his eyes when I said that to him because he was 16. But anyway, the point is that we knew what to do and we didn't do it. And even after I got back from the cruise, I still didn't get a will. So sometimes you have to really make people aware of the problems to make them act on them. The last type of proposition I want to talk about is value. And value propositions are somewhat more philosophical than practical. So you're not trying to get people to do something. You're just trying to get them to accept a value. Something is good or bad, moral or immoral, etc. However, your speech should matter to people. So, you know, if you try to get them to have a value that doesn't really affect their lives, it's probably not a good idea. They're not going to listen to you. So the first step in a value speech is to define your terms. What do you mean by best or immoral or unjustified or healthy or these kinds of things? For example, if I were to say hybrid cars are the best form of transportation available, well, you know, obviously I'm not defining best form of transportation as stylish or safe or cool necessarily, but I'm defining it as being environmentally friendly and being gas efficient. So you first of all define your terms. What do you mean by the words that you are using? Then in the second part of speech you present topical argument to why that's true. Why are the hybrid cars the best? The third thing you'll have to do, though, of course, is deal with the yeah buts, the reservations, because people will be sitting there saying, well, yeah, that's true, but a hybrid car is much more expensive to buy, or a hybrid car is much more expensive to service, or I don't like the looks of them, or they have this problem. So you would have to address those reservations or counter-arguments. And finally, in a value speech, you'd want to make a practical application, at least in the conclusion, of why this is important and maybe how they could take the next step of getting more information. So there are examples provided on the PowerPoint and in the textbook. Again, take your survey, your research, and this information to compose your speech and get a good structured speech.